The scissors hummed like furious bees in the school counselor's room as one 2-year-old Zuri Johnson's locks tumbled to the tile floor, exposing the bald spots she'd hidden with care under those carefully twisted strands that weren't just a style, but a shield against the stares and whispers that had plagued her since the alopecia first appeared when she was just 8 years old, turning what should have been carefree childhood days into a constant battle of concealment and self-doubt. And now here she was, sitting frozen in that cold chair while Miss Hargrove watched with a gleam of triumph in her narrowed eyes, urging the counselor to keep cutting until only stubble remained, the educator having zeroed in on her ideal victim, a shy musician whose Air Force mother was stationed abroad in a distant deployment that left Zuri feeling more isolated than ever, her health issue making her vulnerable in ways she couldn't fully articulate at her young age. And as the last lock fell, a hidden recording captured by Zuri's pal Kira on her phone zipped across the globe through secure channels to Colonel Layla Johnson's device, the video grainy but unmistakable in its depiction of the humiliation unfolding in real time, and what the administration overlooked as they hastily handed out a token 2-day timeout to Miss Hargrove and issued a bland, carefully worded apology that skirted around the truth was that they'd not only shamed a kid in the most invasive way possible, they'd ignited a battle with a leader who directed squadrons in high-stakes combat zones, where lives hung in the balance and decisions were made under fire. A woman whose resolve was forged in the crucible of military discipline and who wouldn't back down from a fight, especially one involving her own flesh and blood. And when Layla Johnson strode into that building days later in her crisp uniform, the corridors went hush. Folks grasping this went beyond hairstyles or school rules. This was about retribution, about holding those in power accountable for the pain they'd inflicted on an innocent child who had done nothing wrong except exist with a condition she couldn't control. Before diving deeper into the unfolding drama, one couldn't help but reflect on how such moments started so innocently, with morning lights slanting through the music room shades, painting golden bars on Zuri Johnson's desk, where she leaned over her notebook, fingers flying as she jotted melody lines for a new song that had been brewing in her mind all week, a tune about soaring high above troubles like a bird in flight, her twisted locks swinging forward to shield her face just right, providing that small comfort in a world that often felt too exposing. The elegant twists weren't mere fashion, they masked the areas where her hair wouldn't grow due to the alopecia that had crept into her life unexpectedly, turning mirrors into enemies and school days into minefields of potential embarrassment. But Zuri had learned to cope, channeling her emotions into music that made her feel powerful even when she felt small. Zuri Johnson. Miss Hargrove's biting tones sliced through the air like a sharp note out of tune, disrupting the harmony Zuri had been building in her head. Zuri's pen halted abruptly, her heart skipping a beat as she sensed the trouble brewing. "Just rapping my harmony notes." "Miss Hargrove," she murmured softly, keeping her eyes downcast to avoid escalating the situation, knowing from past experiences that direct eye contact could be interpreted as defiance by this particular teacher who seemed to thrive on asserting authority. Miss Hargrove marched up the aisle, her boots thumping heavily on the vinyl floor, each step echoing like a drumbeat of impending doom, and at 52 years old, she'd instructed 8th grade for decades, boasting endlessly about her iron rule that kept classrooms in line. Or so she claimed, though many students whispered otherwise in the halls. "That doesn't resemble history to me," she snapped, yanking the notebook from Zuri's desk with a force that made the pages flutter, the class falling into an uneasy quiet as she scanned the pages filled with lyrics and chords that Zuri had poured her soul into. "This explains your slipping focus. Too caught up in tunes to learn anything of value, Miss," Hargrove continued, her voice dripping with disdain, though in truth Zuri's focus wasn't slipping at all. She aced most classes with ease, her mind sharp and creative, but she stayed mute, gazing at her desk, willing the moment to pass like a bad chord in a song. "And those locks, Miss," Hargrove sneered, eyeing Zuri's hair disdainfully, as if it were an offense to her very presence. "So wild, so flashy, overkill for class. Don't you agree, or do you think you're above the standards everyone else follows? Some kids fidgeted uncomfortably in their seats, shifting papers or glancing at each other. While Kira Lee, Zuri's buddy from preschool days when they'd bonded over shared snacks and playground adventures, flashed a worried glance across the room, her hand inching toward her pocket where her phone rested. The intercom buzzed suddenly with morning announcements, crackling to life and rescuing Zuri momentarily from having to respond, the monotone voice of Principal Hale filling the room with reminders about upcoming events and policy updates. Reminder: our firm grooming policy activates today. All must adhere to handbook standards without exception. Hale droned. And Miss Hargrove's lips curved into a satisfied smirk, as if the timing were a sign from above validating her stance. Perfect timing indeed, she said, flinging the notebook back onto Zuri's desk with a thud that made the girl flinch. Stand, Miss Johnson, let's make an example of this. Zuri rose slowly, her pulse racing like a frantic rhythm in her chest, feeling the weight of every eye in the room locked onto her as she tried to steady her breathing. Eyes remained locked on her, some curious, others sympathetic, but none daring to intervene. To the front, Miss Hargrove ordered sharply, jabbing a finger at the board as if directing traffic. Zuri shuffled up, her head low, shoulders hunched, wishing she could disappear into the notes of her music. Class, behold a policy breach in action, Miss Hargrove proclaimed dramatically, circling Zuri like a shark sensing blood in the water, her voice booming to ensure everyone absorbed the lesson. These locks distract and defy every rule we have. The handbook demands tidy, modest hair that doesn't draw unnecessary attention, nothing like this unruly display. Miss Hargrove, Zuri whispered barely audibly, her voice trembling as she gathered the courage to speak up. I have a condition. Louder, if you please, miss. Hargrove cut in abruptly, her tone mocking as she crossed her arms. Share with all of us if it's so important. Zuri swallowed hard, her throat dry, forcing the words out slightly louder. Alopecia. Mom cleared it with admin. There are forms on file. Miss Hargrove's face tightened like a string pulled too taut, her eyes flashing with something akin to victory rather than concern. A condition needing fancy twists? That's a novel excuse if I've ever heard one, she scoffed, turning to address the class with a theatrical wave of her hand. Kids these days will fabricate anything to dodge the rules, won't they? No giggles erupted. Instead, the tension thickened like a heavy fog, the silence deafening as classmates exchanged uneasy looks, knowing this was crossing a line but powerless to stop it. Remove them now or go home, your choice, and make it quick, Miss Hargrove declared firmly, her patience evidently wearing thin. Tears pricked at Zuri's eyes, hot and unwelcome, as the reality sank in. Please, I can't. Mom. Your mom's absent, deployed far away where she can't swoop in to save you. Miss Hargrove interrupted with a cold edge, seizing Zuri's arm in a grip that was just tight enough to hurt without leaving obvious marks. Counselor's office will fix this once and for all. As they exited the room, the door swinging shut behind them with a finality that echoed in Zuri's mind, Kira snuck her phone out discreetly, her fingers trembling slightly as she hit record, capturing Miss Blank, Hargrove's firm hold on Zuri's arm, and the terror etched plainly on her friend's face, the video starting just in time to document the march down the hall. The hallway seemed endless, stretching out like a corridor of judgment, Miss Hargrove dragging Zuri along with determined strides, kids peering from classroom doors with curious eyes that made Zuri's cheeks burn with shame. Miss Patel, Miss Hargrove barked upon entering the counselor's space, her voice commanding as she pushed Zuri forward. This girl's breaking code in the worst way. Claims some ailment, but I'm doubtful handle it. Counselor Patel glanced up from her desk, her brow furrowing deeply as she took in Zuri's tear-streaked face and the obvious distress radiating from the child. What's the issue here? She asked cautiously, setting aside her paperwork. Her hair, obviously, Miss Hargrove stated flatly, as if it were the most straightforward problem in the world, non-compliant with every regulation we have. It's alopecia, Zuri choked out between sobs, her voice breaking as she tried to explain. Mom submitted forms, please check the records. It's all there. Patel headed to the filing cabinet, rifling through folders with a sense of urgency. Hold on just a moment, Miss Hargrove said impatiently, stepping forward to intervene. I reviewed her file earlier this morning, no hair waiver listed anywhere. This was a blatant fib, but Zuri was too shaken, too overwhelmed by the whirlwind of emotions, to challenge it directly, her mind racing with fear and confusion. But Mom spoke to Principal Hale personally. Zuri pleaded desperately, her hands clasping together as if in prayer. Call her, please, or Dad at least. Deployed, right? Overseas, where communication is spotty at best, Miss Hargrove replied with faux sympathy that didn't reach her cold eyes. Rules stand for everyone. No exceptions for sob stories. We need to remove these for hygiene and equity among students. It's only fair. Patel wavered, her hesitation evident as she glanced between the authoritative teacher and the distraught girl. Shouldn't we contact her dad first to confirm? Permission is already on file, Miss Hargrove lied smoothly, her voice oozing confidence that brooked no argument. This is a standard policy enforcement, and we're fully authorized to proceed without delay. Unsure but pressured, Patel eyed them both, her moral compass tugging but ultimately yielding. If it's permitted, as you say. It is. Absolutely. Miss Hargrove pushed forward assertively. Scissors? Ready? These must go immediately. Zuri froze in place, her blood turning to ice as the reality hit her like a crashing wave. No, please don't do this, she begged, her voice rising in panic as tears streamed freely down her face. But Miss Hargrove had already seated her firmly in the chair, guiding her with an unyielding hand. Patel fetched the scissors hesitantly from a drawer, her movements slow as if buying time for a miracle that never came. For your benefit. Really, it'll be over soon, miss, Hargrove said in a tone that was meant to be reassuring but came off as chillingly detached, and then she began snipping, the buzz of the blades filling the small room like an ominous soundtrack. Locks fell one by one, revealing the patchy scalp beneath, each cut feeling like a piece of Zuri's identity being stripped away, her sobs growing louder as she watched her carefully crafted shield vanish into nothingness on the floor. See? Easy as that, miss. Hargrove chirped falsely, her cheerfulness a stark contrast to the devastation she was causing. But she didn't stop there, continuing to trim until all that remained was uneven stubble that made Zuri feel exposed and raw. Stop now, Patel interjected finally, her voice laced with regret as she realized the extent of the damage. But it was too late. The harm was irreversible. Zuri stared at her reflection in the small mirror on the wall, barely recognizing the girl looking back, her hands reaching up instinctively to touch the barren scalp that felt foreign and vulnerable under her fingers, the cold air stinging against her skin like a constant reminder of the violation. Compliant now. And that's what matters. Miss, Hargrove said matter-of-factly, placing the scissors back on the counter with a clatter before exiting the office without a backward glance, leaving Zuri alone with Patel in the heavy silence that followed. Alone with the counselor, who whispered, I'm so sorry. I didn't think she'd go that far. I should have insisted on checking myself, but the words trailed off into inadequacy, unable to mend what had been broken. Call your dad? Patel offered weakly, but Zuri could only curl up in the chair, pulling her knees to her chest as silent sobs racked her body. I want my mom, she finally whispered, the words barely escaping through the lump in her throat. Right away, I'll do that, Patel promised, stepping out to make the call, leaving Zuri alone with her shattered reflection and the weight of what had just happened. Moments later, the door cracked open again, and Kira peeked in, her eyes widening in horror at the sight of her friend transformed so brutally. And without a word, she rushed to Zuri's side, draping her scarf gently over Zuri's head to offer some semblance of cover. "I saw what happened, recorded it all," Kira whispered angrily, her voice trembling with a mix of fury and helplessness. "My cousin's helping us get this out there. That woman can't get away with this, not after what she did to you." Zuri remained blank, pulling the scarf tight around her face as if it could block out the world, staring ahead into nothingness, her mind replaying the snips and falls in an endless loop. That night, as the video began spreading online through discreet shares and outraged posts, the school issued a brief, carefully crafted statement. "We are aware of a policy mix-up that occurred today. The educator involved is on 2-day leave for review. Privacy will be respected throughout this process. No mention of the shave, no acknowledgement of Zuri's medical condition, no hint of the deep humiliation a 1-2-year-old girl had endured at the hands of someone meant to guide and protect her," the words ringing hollow like an off-key note in a symphony. Marcus Johnson paced the living room floor of their modest home, phone glued to his ear as he left yet another urgent message for his wife. The ex-Air Force pilot's voice strained with worry and anger. "Layla, call me as soon as you get this. It's Zuri. Something terrible at school. It's really bad," he said, ending the call and running a hand over his face, exhaustion etching deep lines into his features as he worried about how to handle this alone. Communication with Layla was spotty at best due to her deployment, and Marcus had no way of knowing when she'd receive his messages, leaving him to navigate the storm solo for now. Upstairs, Zuri hadn't uttered a word since he'd picked her up from school, simply handing him Kira's scarf and walking silently to the car, her exposed scalp a shocking sight that had unleashed a flood of emotions in Marcus: rage at the injustice, confusion over how this could happen, heartbreak for his daughter's pain, and a burning desire to storm back into that school and demand answers from everyone involved. But Zuri needed him more than vengeance did right now, so he'd driven home carefully, helping her inside when her legs seemed too weak to carry her. And now she sat motionless on her bed, staring at the wall with the scarf pulled tightly over her head, her guitar lying untouched in the corner where it usually brought her joy. Across town, Principal Hale had called an emergency meeting in his office, the blinds drawn tight, and his secretary given strict instructions not to interrupt under any circumstances. "This is a disaster waiting to explode," Hale muttered under his breath, loosening his tie as sweat beaded on his forehead, nearing retirement and hoping to coast through his final years without incident, but now this threatened to upend everything. "What possessed you, Vivian, to take it that far?" "Miss," Hargrove sat rigid in one of the visitor chairs, her posture defensive as she crossed her arms tightly. Policy enforcement, plain and simple, the girl was defiant from the start. The district lawyer, Elena Cruz, coughed discreetly to draw attention. "Let's focus on damage control here. The video is partial, no actual cut shown, so we can frame this as a simple error in judgment." "Error?" Hale's voice rose in incredulity. "She shaved a student's head." "For goodness sake!" "Partial proof only," Cruz replied coolly, her demeanor unflappable. "Our policy backs us up, and the medical file was vague at best, no specific hair waiver noted." "Was there anything about alopecia in there?" Hale asked, vaguely recalling a conversation from months ago with Zuri's mother. "Not hair-specific, as far as I saw, Miss," Hargrove answered quickly. Too quickly, perhaps, but Cruz tapped her legal pad thoughtfully. "Here's our approach. Admit an incident occurred. Say procedures weren't followed to the letter, hence the 2-day leave, but don't admit to any specific actions that could incriminate. Cite student privacy laws to avoid diving into details, and if the parents push hard, suggest private mediation to keep it out of the courts and the headlines." Hale nodded slowly, rubbing his temples as he processed the plan. "Fine. Draft the statement immediately. I want this contained by dawn before it blows up further." As the adults schemed in their dimly lit office, plotting ways to minimize the fallout and protect their own positions, Zuri sat in her darkening bedroom, the guitar that had been her constant companion lying open beside her but the strings remaining untouched, her once vibrant melodies feeling childish and meaningless in the wake of the day's events. She ran her hand over her scalp again, feeling the uneven patches where Miss Grop Hargrove had been particularly rough with the scissors, the physical sensation strange and alien, but it paled in comparison to the hollowness gnawing at her inside, a void where her confidence and joy had once resided. In her mind, she kept replaying the moment when the first lock fell to the floor, the sudden exposure that left her feeling naked in front of the world, the gleam of satisfaction in Miss Hargrove's eyes that made her stomach churn, the utter helplessness that wrapped around her like a suffocating blanket. Marcus knocked gently on her door, his voice soft and tentative. "Dinner's ready. Sweetie, come down and eat with me." No reply came, Zuri remaining silent as she had since the car ride home. He pushed the door open slightly, peering in with concern etched on his face. "You need to eat something to keep your strength up," he urged. But she turned away from him, pulling the covers over her head to block out the light and his worried gaze. Marcus sighed deeply, his heart breaking for his daughter, who had always been so full of life and music. "I'll leave the plate here on your desk. Try to have a few bites, okay? I love you, Zoo, and we're going to fix this somehow." But as he closed the door softly behind him, he wondered silently how one could truly fix something like this, how to mend a child's spirit that had been so cruelly broken by an adult's cruelty. In another part of town, Kira Lee sat at her cousin Lena's kitchen table, watching intently as Lena uploaded the video clip to various platforms, her fingers flying across the keyboard with determination. "Are you sure we should do this?" Kira asked nervously, biting her lip as doubts crept in. "Zuri is so private, she might not want the whole world seeing her like that." Lena, a young advocate with a fire for justice burning in her eyes, looked up from her laptop. "This isn't just about Zuri anymore, Kira. This is about every girl of color who's been policed for her appearance, about challenging the power structures that allow this kind of abuse to happen without consequence. Sometimes the only way to fight injustice is to expose it to the light. And Zuri will thank us someday when she sees the change it brings." She hit the upload button decisively. Done now, we wait and see how far it spreads. By morning, the short clip had been viewed over 15,000 times. Comments flooding in with most expressing outrage at the blatant mistreatment, some questioning what had happened before the recording started to provide context, others demanding to see the full story and calling for immediate action against the teacher involved. The music teacher, Miss Vega, known for her vibrant energy and genuine connection with students through rhythm and song, caught wind of the incident during her morning prep period and immediately stormed to Principal Hale's office, not bothering with pleasantries as she burst in. "Is it true what I'm hearing? Did Hargrove really shave Zuri Johnson's head over some ridiculous policy?" Hale's face remained impassive, a mask of professional detachment. "Miss Vega, you know I can't discuss disciplinary matters involving other staff members. It's confidential." "This isn't about staff politics," Miss Vega pressed, her voice rising with passion. "This is about a 1-2-year-old girl with a medical condition who was humiliated in our school, a place that's supposed to be safe and nurturing for her growth. We're handling it internally." Hale dismissed with a wave of his hand, turning back to his computer. "Miss," Vega's voice rose further, echoing off the walls. "Handling it by giving Hargrove a 2-day slap on the wrist? That's not handling it. That's sweeping it under the rug and hoping no one notices the lump." Hale's expression hardened, his eyes narrowing. "Be careful with your tone, Miss Vega. Your contract renewal is coming up soon, and I'd hate to see your passion interfere with your professional judgment and future. Here. Are you threatening me?" "Miss," Vega asked incredulously, her hands balling into fists at her sides. "I'm reminding you of your place in this institution," Hale replied coldly. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a district call in 5 minutes. Close the door on your way out." That afternoon, Marcus found an unmarked envelope slipped under his front door. his hands shaking slightly as he opened it to find a handwritten note inside. Check council files. They knew what happened and did nothing. An anonymous insider was reaching out, someone who knew the truth and couldn't stay silent any longer, providing a potential lead in the fight ahead. That night, Zuri finally fell into an exhausted sleep after hours of silent tears staining her pillow. But her rest wasn't peaceful, plagued by dreams where she stood on a school stage during assembly, her locks beginning to fall one by one, drifting to the floor like autumn leaves in a storm. The entire student body pointing and laughing with faces distorting into grotesque masks of cruelty that mocked her vulnerability. In the dream, she tried to run, to escape the spotlight, but her feet were rooted to the stage as if glued, and Miss Hargrove appeared suddenly with oversized scissors, smiling wickedly as she approached with deliberate steps. Zuri woke with a piercing scream, her body drenched in sweat, heart pounding wildly. Marcus rushed into her room, gathering her into his arms as she sobbed against his chest, the first sound she'd made in nearly 24 hours since the ordeal began. "It's okay, baby. It's just a dream. Daddy's here. You're safe now," he whispered, rocking her gently back and forth like he did when she was little. But deep down, they both knew it wasn't true. How could she feel safe when she'd have to face those same hallways again? Those same stares and whispers that now carried the weight of her trauma. Marcus called the school district board the next morning, demanding an emergency meeting to address the assault on his daughter. The secretary put him on hold for what felt like an eternity, 17 minutes ticking by slowly, before returning with a response that boiled his blood. "The board will review the incident at their next scheduled meeting in a few weeks," she informed him in a professionally detached tone. "A few weeks? My daughter was assaulted yesterday." Marcus's grip tightened on the phone, his voice rising in frustration. "Sir, we understand your frustration, but proper protocols must be followed. The incident report has been filed, and the teacher has been disciplined accordingly. If you'd like to file a formal grievance, I can email you the form right away." Marcus hung up fuming, realizing they were stalling deliberately, hoping the outrage would die down and he'd give up the fight before it gained momentum. They didn't know who they were dealing with, a family with military resilience running through their veins. Online, the video continued to gain traction rapidly. Local news outlets picking up the story, though their coverage was frustratingly vague and balanced to avoid lawsuits. Incident at local middle school sparks controversy and debate. Comment sections filled with conflicting opinions that ranged from empathetic to dismissive. "That poor girl. The teacher should be fired immediately. We don't know the whole story. Maybe the kid was being disruptive and deserved it. Why are people making this about race when it's clearly just about following school rules? Black girls' bodies are always policed. This is just another example of systemic bias at work." The discourse raged on heatedly, turning the incident into a polarizing topic. But for the Johnson family, this wasn't some abstract debate to be scrolled through. It was their life shattered in a single afternoon by a teacher's cruelty and an institution's indifference. Far away at a remote Air Force outpost, Colonel Layla Johnson finally received Marcus's encrypted video message amid the chaos of her daily operations, her stoic composure the same that had earned her respect among subordinates through years of leadership cracking visibly as she watched the short clip of her daughter being marched down the hallway, fear etched deeply across Zuri's young face like a scar. The attached message was brief but gut-wrenching. "Zuri needs you desperately. They shaved her head. All of it. She hasn't spoken in days. I'm trying, but I don't know what to do anymore." Layla's hand flew to her mouth, stifling a gasp that threatened to escape. 20 years of military training had prepared her for battles, for strategy under pressure, for loss in the field. But not this. Not an attack on her child in a place that should have been a sanctuary. Within minutes, she was in her commanding officer's quarters, requesting emergency family leave with a firmness that brooked no delay. And within hours, she was on a transport plane headed home, her face a mask of controlled fury as her mind raced with questions, scenarios, and meticulously planned steps to take once she arrived. Someone had touched her daughter, violated her child's dignity in the most personal way, exploited their power to humiliate a 1-2-year-old girl who was already fighting an invisible battle with her health, and that someone would pay dearly for their actions. As the plane soared across continents and oceans, Layla made a silent promise to her daughter, one that fueled her determination. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. This ends not with silence or acceptance, but with justice served and systems changed to prevent such horrors from repeating. Sunlight pierced the base blinds as Colonel Layla Johnson landed after a grueling flight, her uniform sharp and unyielding, a symbol of the discipline that had carried her through countless missions, but now channeled into a personal war that burned hotter than any battlefield she'd known, with no time to change or rest, because the fire in her veins demanded immediate action against those who had dared to harm her daughter. No time for unpacking or settling in. She craved answers. The kind that came from facing down the perpetrators and peeling back the layers of deceit that had allowed this atrocity to unfold unchecked. Marcus met her at the airport, his face drawn with exhaustion from nights of worry, updating her en route with every detail he'd gathered, from the video's spread to the school's dismissive response. "Careful with how you approach this," he warned, his voice tight with concern as they navigated traffic toward the school. "Your career could be at risk. If things escalate too publicly, our girl comes first." "Always," Layla replied, her tone steel-edged, eyes fixed on the road ahead, her military-honed strategy already forming. No rash, emotional outbursts that could be twisted against her, but calculated moves designed to expose and dismantle, drawing on years of leading ops where precision meant survival. The school halls silenced at her entry like a wave receding, her boots echoing with rhythmic authority that commanded attention without a word spoken, staff peeking from offices with wide eyes, students gawking and whispering as they pressed against lockers, the air thick with the unspoken realization that this uniformed figure wasn't here for a routine visit. The counselor's door stood ajar. Inside, a cluster of faculty chatted casually over coffee, but the conversation died instantly as Layla pushed it open wider, her presence filling the space like an unignorable force. Miss Hargrove was mid-sip from her mug when she turned, recognition flashing across her face like a lightning strike, followed by a flicker of fear that she quickly masked with feigned surprise. "Colonel Johnson," she stammered, the cup trembling slightly in her hand. "I didn't know you were back from your assignment so soon." "Evidently not," Layla replied, icy cold, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade, remaining framed in the doorway to maintain control of the room's dynamics. The other teachers exchanged uncomfortable glances, murmuring excuses as they filed out one by one, squeezing past Layla with averted eyes until only Miss Hargrove remained, isolated and exposed. "I understand you've met my daughter rather closely, in fact, intimately enough to take scissors to her head," Layla continued, her words measured but laced with an undercurrent of menace. Miss Hargrove attempted to regain her composure, setting the cup down with a clink. "It was policy enforcement only. Nothing personal, perhaps. If you'd been more present in her daily life, these issues wouldn't arise. Don't twist this into dress codes or my deployment absences." Layla cut her off sharply, stepping forward just enough to close the distance without invading space, her gaze locking on like a targeting system. "We both know better than that, don't we? The air between us has a history thicker than any handbook rule." Tension crackled like static electricity, laden with unspoken grudges that simmered just below the surface. "What are you implying exactly?" "Miss," Hargrove replied. But her voice had lost its earlier conviction, wavering under the scrutiny. "Lackland Base, years back, does that refresh your memory, Airman Hargrove? Or did you think I'd forget the face of a recruit who caused so much disruption?" Color drained from Miss Hargrove's face as the past resurfaced unbidden. "You were in my recruit unit during basic training." Layla pressed on quietly, her tone low but unrelenting. Dismissed after repeated fails in qualifications and filing false claims against diverse peers to cover your own shortcomings. That was different. You targeted me from day one, made it impossible. Miss Hargrove whispered defensively, her hands clenching at her sides. Because you couldn't follow simple orders, and because you spread lies about your colleagues of color, claiming favoritism where none existed, sound familiar. This pattern of yours? Miss? Hargrove shook visibly now, her defenses crumbling. You can't prove any of that. Not then, and not now. I don't need to prove it. I lived through your sabotage attempts, and now my daughter has suffered the consequences of your unresolved bitterness. Layla stepped closer, her voice dropping to a deadly whisper that carried the weight of command. If you ever come near Zuri again, you'll learn exactly why my unit nicknamed me Storm. I bring the thunder that levels everything in its path. With that, she turned sharply on her heel and strode toward the principal's office, memories from her military past flooding back. Hargrove is a problem recruit from the start, undermining minorities in the unit, alleging discriminatory treatment that investigations proved baseless, and after her discharge, muttering threats about making them pay someday, a vow that now seemed fulfilled through a child as proxy. Now wielding power over kids instead of failing at adult responsibilities, the realization made Layla's blood boil, but she kept her expression neutral, a mask of professionalism as she approached Principal Hale's office. His secretary attempted to block her path with a polite but firm, "Do you have an appointment?" But Layla didn't break stride, pushing open the door without knocking. Hale looked up from his computer, irritation flashing across his face before recognition set in, prompting him to stand quickly. "Mrs. Johnson, we weren't expecting you today." "Colonel Johnson," she corrected firmly, remaining standing to assert dominance in the space. "And you should have been expecting me from the moment your teacher assaulted my daughter under your watch." Hale gestured awkwardly to a chair. "Please sit. I understand you're upset, and we're addressing it." "I'm not upset, mister." "Hale, I'm strategic, and there's a world of difference between the two." She placed a military-style dossier on his desk with deliberate precision, the label reading, "Incident Report, Johnson, Abuse, Neglect, Rights Violation." Hale eyed it warily without touching. "What's this document? This is what proper handling of a situation looks like," Layla said coldly, her tone brooking no nonsense. "My team has compiled witness statements, medical documentation of Zuri's alopecia condition, and copies of all the permission forms we filed with your office last year, which were clearly ignored." Hale's confident demeanor faltered, a bead of sweat forming on his brow. "Now let's not get ahead of ourselves here. Miss Hargrove has been disciplined appropriately. A 2-day suspension is not discipline, it's a vacation, a slap on the wrist that mocks the trauma inflicted." She tapped the folder emphatically. "Inside, you'll also find evidence of Miss Hargrove's history of racially motivated incidents. This isn't her first time targeting a child of color, though it may be her most brazen and documented." Hale's face darkened, his voice turning defensive. "These are serious allegations you're throwing around. They're documented facts," Layla corrected evenly, her military precision evident, "and they'll be submitted to the district board, the state education department, and if necessary, the media outlets already circling this story." "You're threatening the reputation of this entire school over one isolated incident?" Hale asked incredulously, leaning forward. "You threatened my daughter's dignity, her mental health, and her right to an education free from discrimination and harm." Layla replied without flinching, her gaze unwavering. "I'd say we're still not quite even in the balance of wrongs." Later that afternoon, Miss Hargrove sat in a small radio studio downtown, adjusting her collar nervously as a producer clipped a microphone to her blouse, the hum of equipment filling the air. "We'll be live in 3 minutes," the producer said briskly. "Just tell your side of the story like we discussed, keep it sympathetic." Miss Hargrove nodded, practicing her most wounded expression in the nearby monitor. transforming her face into a mask of contrived remorse. When the red light flickered on, she leaned in. "Thank you for having me. It's important that people hear the truth behind the headlines." The anchor nodded encouragingly. "And what is that truth, Miss Hargrove?" "I was simply doing my job, enforcing a strict grooming policy that applies to all students equally," she replied, her voice quavering slightly for effect, though it was rehearsed. The girl had been warned multiple times about her hair being a distraction. Her family claims a medical condition, but there was nothing in her file about exemptions for such elaborate styles. The anchor noted the family's statement. "Frankly, I think this is being blown out of proportion because her mother is in the military. She's trying to play the hero by threatening the school. But where was she when her daughter needed guidance on following simple rules?" The anchor's eyebrows rose at the personal attack, but before a follow-up, Miss Hargrove pressed on. "I've dedicated my life to teaching, over 20 years in the classroom. And now my reputation is being destroyed because one parent doesn't think the rules apply to her child. It's heartbreaking." Across town, Marcus Daniels waited until nightfall to return to the school. The anonymous note about the counselor's files burning a hole in his pocket all day, compelling him to act despite the risks. Who had sent it, and what secrets would he uncover? The janitor, Theo Williams, who had nodded subtly at Layla earlier in acknowledgement of shared understanding, was waiting by the side entrance, keys jingling in his hand. "Theo Williams," he introduced himself in a low voice. "My niece had Miss Hargrove a few years back. Trust me, I know what that woman is capable of. The subtle and not-so-subtle ways she targets certain kids. Thank you for this. I don't want to get you in trouble," Marcus said, shaking the man's hand gratefully. Theo shrugged nonchalantly. "Some things matter more than a job, like making sure no other kid goes through what your daughter did." He guided Marcus through the darkened hallways, the beam of a flashlight cutting through the shadows, leading to the counselor's office, which was unlocked as promised. Marcus headed straight for the file cabinet, his heart pounding as he rifled through folders under the dim light. It took him 15 minutes of tense searching before he found a complaint form Zuri had submitted 2 weeks before the incident, detailing how Miss Hargrove had made repeated comments about her locks, calling them distracting and unkempt, with notes on how it made her feel singled out. The form was signed and dated, but scrolled across the bottom in red ink were the words, "No action required, policy compliant." Marcus photographed the document with his phone, his hands shaking with a mix of anger and validation. They'd had warning, and they'd done nothing to protect his child. While Marcus gathered this crucial evidence, Layla sat at her home office desk that evening, methodically filing formal complaints with every relevant authority: the State Board of Education, the Office for Civil Rights, the American Civil Liberties Union, and even the National Association of School Principals. Each submission meticulously documented with attachments of the video, medical records, and now the photographed complaint, her military precision turning personal pain into a structured assault on the system. When she finished past midnight, she checked on Zuri, who had finally fallen asleep clutching her guitar pick like a talisman, then rejoined Marcus in the kitchen to review his findings. "Find anything solid?" she asked as he showed her the photos from the counselor's office. "They knew, Layla," Marcus said, his voice breaking with barely contained rage. "Our baby tried to tell them 2 weeks ago, and they ignored her completely." Layla studied the document closely, her expression hardening like forged steel. "Principal Hale's signature is right here on the dismissal. He personally declined to investigate or intervene." She looked up at Marcus, determination flashing in her eyes. "They're going to regret that decision more than they can imagine." The next morning, Principal Hale called Miss Vega into his office, the music teacher entering wearily, noting the presence of the district's lawyer sitting sternly beside him. "Jason, effective immediately, you're being placed on administrative leave," Hale announced without preamble, sliding a form across the desk. "On what grounds?" Miss Vega stared in disbelief, her mind reeling. Disrupting the educational environment Several parents have complained that you've been discussing the Johnson situation in class, stirring up unnecessary drama. That's not true at all, miss, Vega protested vehemently. Students have questions about what happened, and I've simply reminded them to be kind to their classmates during difficult times, to use music as a way to express empathy. Your contract specifies that teachers will not introduce controversial topics in the classroom, the lawyer interjected smoothly. Your leave is paid, but we expect you to turn in your keys and clear out your desk by noon today. Miss Vega stood slowly, anger radiating from her like heat from a flame. You know what happened to that child was wrong. Everyone in this building knows it deep down. And this is how you respond? By silencing anyone who dares to speak up for what's right? That will be all, miss. Vega? Hale said dismissively, turning back to his paperwork as if she were already gone. As news of Miss Proust, Vega's forced leave spread through the school like wildfire. Layla prepared for her most public move yet, dressed in her full uniform with medals gleaming under the studio lights as she sat across from a national morning news anchor, ready to turn the tide. Colonel Johnson, thank you for joining us. Can you tell us what happened to your daughter Zuri? The anchor began. Layla looked directly into the camera, her voice steady and commanding. My daughter Zuri has a medical condition called alopecia that causes hair loss. She wears locks to protect her scalp and maintain her privacy in a world that's often unkind to differences. Last week, a teacher at her school forcibly shaved her head, claiming it violated the grooming code, despite our filed exemptions. The school has stated this was a miscommunication, the anchor noted neutrally. There was no miscommunication, there was deliberate cruelty and an institutional cover-up, Layla replied firmly. We had submitted all proper medical forms. Zuri even filed a complaint about this teacher's targeting behavior 2 weeks prior, which was ignored. What do you hope will come from sharing your story publicly? Layla leaned forward slightly, her gaze unwavering. Accountability, justice for Zuri, and systemic change so no child ever experiences this kind of violation again. I've served this country for 20 years, protecting values like dignity and equality. If the system won't protect my daughter, I will dismantle it piece by piece and rebuild it stronger. The interview went viral almost immediately, viewed over 2 million times by nightfall, clips circulating on every social media platform, her final statement becoming a rallying cry for parents nationwide. If the system won't protect my daughter, I will dismantle it myself. The family's phone rang constantly, with news outlets requesting interviews, parents sharing similar stories of bias in schools, and civil rights organizations offering support and resources. Marcus fielded the calls carefully, documenting each one for potential use, while Layla focused on their legal strategy. But most importantly, they turned their attention to Zuri, who remained withdrawn, speaking little and eating less, her once bright melodies turning dark and fragmented as she strummed her guitar in silent concentration, pages of her notebook filled with harsh chords and somber lyrics that reflected her inner turmoil. By morning, a small group of protesters had gathered outside the middle school, their numbers swelling with each passing hour. Parents, former students, and community members holding signs reading "Justice for Zuri" and "Protect our children from bias." Among them Kira, accompanied by her mother and cousin, who was more vocal in interviews. This isn't an isolated incident, the cousin told a local reporter passionately. Miss Hargrove has been targeting students of color for years. Ask any alumni about the subtle digs and outright humiliations. Her words sparked a flood of social media posts from former students, each sharing their own experiences. She made me straighten my curls in front of class because they were too ethnic. She said my name was too hard and called me by a nickname all year. She mocked my accents in presentations, saying it limited my potential. The stories mounted, creating a damning pattern that could no longer be dismissed as a one-off misunderstanding. Inside the school, tension filled the hallways like a palpable fog. Students whispering about Zuri, about Miss Hargrove, about the growing protesters outside, teachers struggling to maintain focus as they became aware that every word and action could become part of the controversy. Late that evening, Layla received an unexpected email from someone named Raj Patel. Identifying as the school's IT technician, Mrs. Johnson, I've been following what happened to your daughter. There's something you should know. The full security video from the counselor's office exists, or at least it did. Principal Hale ordered me to delete it from our servers the morning after the incident. I told him it was gone, but I might be able to recover it from a backup system. If you're interested, we can meet somewhere off school grounds. Layla forwarded the email to their lawyer before responding with a neutral meeting location, sensing this could be the smoking gun they needed: unedited footage showing exactly what had transpired. But Raj never showed up at the agreed spot. 2 days passing with no word, Layla trying the number he'd provided only for it to go straight to voicemail, concern mounting, as she considered filing a missing person report. Then her phone chimed with a text from an unknown number. "Stop digging, or we'll bury your hacker friend." A chill ran down her spine. She immediately forwarded the message to her military contacts in cybersecurity, then called Marcus. "They're threatening Raj now," she said without preamble. "Whoever they are, this is escalating beyond the school. The administration wouldn't go that far, would they?" Marcus replied, uncertainty creeping into his voice. "Maybe not Hale directly," Layla agreed. "But someone's pulling strings here. This feels bigger than one teacher or one principal. Like a network, protecting their own." While Layla worked to uncover the truth and locate Raj, Zuri continued her silent recovery at home, not yet ready to return to school where the memories lingered like ghosts in the halls. But she'd begun composing again, the first few songs somber with minor keys and haunting melodies that echoed her pain. But on the 4th day, something shifted. She started a new piece, a barren field in lyrics giving way to a sprouting seed of hope, notes rising tentatively toward major chords. When Layla heard it drifting from Zuri's room, she stood in the doorway, tears silently streaming down her face at the sign of resilience. "It's beautiful, baby," she whispered. Zuri didn't respond verbally but offered her mother the first genuine eye contact since the incident, a brief, meaningful glance that spoke volumes of emerging strength. As the Johnson family focused on healing amid the storm, the media landscape erupted into predictable battle lines, conservative outlets framing the story as overblown, military mom uses connections to target dedicated teacher, school discipline versus political correctness. The Zuri controversy, while progressive voices highlighted the racial undertones and called for reform. In response, Layla called a press conference on their front lawn, dressed in civilian clothes, a deliberate choice to emphasize her role as a mother rather than a colonel standing before a bank of microphones with posture still military straight. "I've heard the accusations that I'm using my position to intimidate the school," she began calmly. "Let me be clear. I am not here as Colonel Johnson. I am here as Zuri's mother, fighting for her as any parent would." She methodically listed the evidence they'd gathered: the medical exemption forms, Zuri's ignored complaint, witness statements from classmates, the school's contradictory public statements that shifted blame. "These are not military tactics. This is basic thoroughness and advocacy. If that makes certain people uncomfortable, perhaps they should examine why they're defending the indefensible," she ended by addressing families watching. "If your child has experienced similar treatment, don't stay silent, contact us. There is power in our collective voice, and together we can force the change needed." The press conference was a masterclass in controlled messaging: no outbursts, no unproven accusations, just a mother wielding facts like weapons, turning public opinion further in their favor. The following day, Superintendent Elena Cruz called her own press conference at district headquarters, flanked by the school board president and attorneys, announcing the formation of a special reform task force to review grooming policies and disciplinary procedures. "We take these allegations seriously," Cruz stated, avoiding Zuri's name to maintain distance. While we conduct a thorough investigation, Miss Hargrove will remain on paid administrative leave. She introduced immediate reforms, sensitivity training for all staff, a review of all grooming violations from the past 3 years, and enhanced protocols for medical accommodations. Watching from home, Layla scoffed at the screen. Optics? Not genuine justice. They're hoping this task force buys time for public interest to fade. Maybe it's time to consider other options, Marcus suggested hesitantly. Private school, perhaps, where Zuri can get a fresh start away from all this. Layla turned to him with genuine surprise. You want to run from the fight? I want our daughter back, the girl who used to sing freely, who didn't flinch at loud noises or hide in her room, Marcus replied, his voice cracking. Our first responsibility is to Zuri, not to fixing a broken system for hypothetical future victims. They're not hypothetical, Layla challenged, her eyes flashing. They're real kids waiting to see if someone will stand up and say enough. If we run now, how many more will suffer the same fate? Their argument was interrupted by a notification on Layla's phone. Kira had sent a message. Found something important coming over. 20 minutes later, Kira sat at the Johnson kitchen table, her phone connected to their laptop, displaying a screenshot of a group text message between Miss Hargrove and another teacher, dated the morning of the incident. I'm not sure if it helps, but my friend's older sister teaches at the school she was in this group chat with Miss Hargrove and others. Got kicked out after they found out we're friends. But she saved some messages first, Kira said nervously. Layla and Marcus leaned closer to read the exchange. Miss Hargrove. That Johnson girl is testing my patience again, humming in class instead of notes. Unknown teacher. The quiet one with the locks? She's top in music, though. Miss Hargrove. Don't be fooled, she's been giving attitude for weeks. Unknown. Let it go, Mom deployed. Dad's solo. Miss Hargrove. No, about to teach this brat a lesson she'll never forget. The timestamp showed the message sent just 30 minutes before Miss Hargrove confronted Zuri. This is premeditation, Layla whispered, her legal instincts kicking in. She planned the humiliation. Can we use it in court? Marcus asked. Absolutely, Layla confirmed. Your friend's sister may need to testify. Is she willing? Kira nodded. She feels bad about not reporting Hargrove sooner. Later that night, after Kira left and Marcus fell asleep on the couch from exhaustion, Layla checked on Zuri one last time, surprised to find her awake, sitting up in bed with her notebook of lyrics. Can't sleep? Layla asked softly, sitting on the bed's edge. Zuri shook her head, still not speaking much, but she turned the notebook toward her mother, revealing a drawing of two figures, harmonizing. One tall in uniform, one smaller with a bald head, and notes flowing between them like bridges. Layla's throat tightened with emotion. That's beautiful, sweetheart. Is that us? Zuri nodded, then spoke just 5 words, barely above a whisper. But they changed everything. Don't let them win, Mom. Layla gathered her daughter in her arms, holding her close as tears streamed down both their faces. I won't. Baby, she promised fiercely. I won't let them steal your song. The law office of Mia Chen occupied a high-rise downtown. Its reception, a study in modern elegance, with abstract art on walls depicting justice scales in bold colors. Layla sat beside Marcus on a leather sofa, posture straight, while Mia, a respected civil rights attorney with a track record of wins against institutions, reviewed the documents, medical records, school policies, witness statements, screenshots of Hargrove's texts. At 45, Mia had built her career on fighting for the marginalized, her sharp mind a weapon against systemic wrongs. You've gathered an impressive dossier, Mia said, looking up. Most clients come with anger alone. You've brought a fortress of evidence. Military training document everything, Layla replied simply. Mia nodded, leaning forward. Be clear. School districts have resources to drag this out. Are you ready for a prolonged battle? Whatever it takes, Marcus answered firmly. Good. Because I'm filing a multi-million-dollar lawsuit naming the district Hale and Hargrove personally claims include assault, negligence, intentional distress, civil rights violations. Mia paused. It'll get ugly. They'll attack your parenting, deployment absences, even military service. Layla's expression remained unchanged. Let them try. We have truth on our side. The following morning, as Mia's team prepared paperwork, Miss Hargrove received an unexpected visitor at her home, a man in an expensive suit carrying a briefcase, his smile reassuring. Miss Hargrove, I'm Blaine Hartley. I'd like to discuss your legal options. She eyed him suspiciously. I can't afford private counsel. You won't need to. My services are arranged by concerned parties. Inside, Blaine explained his firm was retained by those recognizing broader implications protecting educational authority. What Miss Hargrove didn't know was the retainer came from a foundation tied to school board members, a staff protection fund that had buried similar incidents. By week's end, Mia filed the suit, court granting emergency hearing due to minor involvement. Courthouse steps crowded with reporters, protesters, inside packed. Layla in uniform, Hargrove meek. Judge Ruiz. Dignity in proceedings. Mia opened. Abuse of power shaved, knowing condition. Defense distanced. No direct involvement. Misunderstood policy. Witnesses. Patel regretful. Hargrove insisted permission lie. Cross. Blame shift overruled. Emails. Hale handle quietly. Turning point. Raj appeared, escorted. Vid deleted, backed up, played. Zuri pleading. Hargrove cutting gleefully. Gasps. Recess. Blaine cornered Hargrove. Video damaging show remorse. She provoked. Facade cracked on stand under cross. History with Colonel? Revealed vendetta. Silence. Damning. Zuri testified behind a protective screen in the courtroom, her voice steady despite the weight of reliving the nightmare, describing how she was humming softly in class after finishing her work when Miss Hargrove erupted over her locks, dragging her to the office where pleas fell on deaf ears as the scissors stripped away her shield. Her testimony culminating in a poignant revelation. I stayed silent afterward because no one listened when it mattered most. My words were as invisible as my pain. The courtroom hung in silence, the raw truth resonating like a struck chord. Even the judge appearing moved as Zuri stepped down with quiet dignity, her support counselor by her side. Miss Hargrove took the stand next, coached to appear contrite with downcast eyes and folded hands, but under Mia's relentless cross-examination, the facade shattered like brittle glass. Did you have personal history with Colonel Johnson before targeting her daughter? Mia pressed, revealing the military connection, Hargrove snapping. She had it in for me back then, just like entitled families do now. Weaponizing conditions for special treatment rules are rules for everyone else. The outburst hung heavy. Whitfield closing his eyes in defeat as the jury absorbed the venom. Silence answering Mia's final question. Did you target Zuri to settle an old score? The day's final surprise was Colonel Elias Grant, Layla's former commander, testifying to Hargrove's recruit-era bias. She undermined peers of color repeatedly. Investigations found her claims baseless, flagged for ethics concerns upon discharge. This reframed the incident as calculated revenge, jurors' expressions shifting from neutral to sympathetic towards Zuri. That evening, a leaked deposition snippet hit media. Hargrove's offhand. They should be grateful I didn't shave the whole class, sparking fierce backlash. Calls flooding the district for her permanent removal. Journalist Kai Lin, specializing in education scandals, sensed deeper rot. Why a top firm for a teacher's defense? Requesting records that uncovered a staff protection fund by board members Patterson, Simmons, Walsh, shielding 8 staff over a decade in minority student cases, All settled quietly with NDAs, Hargrove's fees, the latest draw. Kai's expose headline Sunday, Board's secret shield for abusers, detailing taxpayer-funded cover-ups, going national as journalists probed similar district schemes nationwide. Public pressure mounted. Victims emerging. Jackson, biracial teen expelled for distracting afro. Emma, disabled student denied aids and shamed. Their stories amplifying Zuri's. Layla organizing a network for shared legal aid. Therapy referrals. Advocacy training. Vega, reinstated amid outcry, reclaimed her music room, inviting reporters outside. I failed Zuri by fearing reprisal, but regret teaches. I'll amplify student voices through song, turning pain into anthems of strength. The image Vega with the Johnsons, Zuri between symbolized unity, viral as a beacon of cross-racial solidarity. District offered settlement. $5 million, admission of wrongdoing but NDA. No buying silence, Layla countered. Envelope threat. Back off or regret the tune Layla decoding tune as board influence on a judge nicknamed Tune Ford. Raj's hack of boardroom feed confirmed. Post-meeting clip of Patterson, Simmons, Walsh plotting. Johnson lasts a week. Ford owes me for that permit. Expose headlined corruption tape. Board plots. Judicial fix. Resignations following within 48 hours. Special elections drawing advocacy parents as candidates. Alam Tasha's viral stream. At 14, Hargrove cut my braid in class, calling it unprofessional, dismissed as exaggeration. Zuri empowered me to speak. Pattern solidified Hargrove as serial abuser. Zuri, reluctant but resolute, visited Vega after hours, hallways echoing memories but steps firmer, thanking her mentor in the music room now adorned with lyric prints. Music heals when words falter, listen. Zuri smiled genuinely, a spark reigniting her melody-making spirit. Trial closed amid rain-pattering windows, Mia's closing. Zuri entrusted to protectors who betrayed evidence proves malice, cover-up. Verdict must affirm no child endures such violation. Defense pled for educator trust in chaotic classrooms. Jury deliberated hours, returning liable on all counts. $3 million compensatory for therapy. Education. $7 million punitive, $10 million total. State's largest school misconduct award. Detective arrested Hargrove. Reopening prior complaints charges. Assault. Endangerment. Hargrove's glance at Zuri met unyielding resolve. Defeat in her slump. Outside, sun broke as Layla addressed mics. Verdict declares no abuse tolerated. No reputation over well-being. Governor announced Zuri Act. Medical privacy protocols. Oversight against bias. Passed swiftly, sparking national reforms. Inclusive guidelines. Whistleblower safeguards. Hale resigned. Vega principle. Fostering creativity over conformity. Attendance up, incidents down. Political calls for Layla. Senate run? No foundation for trauma survivors first. Unsilenced project launched. Music therapy nationwide. Settlement seeding grants. Kira's podcast. Unlocked. Zuri guest. Discussing resilience. Trauma muted me. Sharing amplified. School transformed. Cultural celebrations. Sensitivity modules. Marcus's groups aided military families navigating biases. Hargrove sentenced. Suspended term, therapy. Teaching ban. White House Medal for Layla. Exemplifies courage. Movement protects generations. Speech. Zuri's honor. Every silenced child's we fight on. Normalcy returned, evolved. Layla balancing duty. Foundation. Marcus expanding networks. Zuri school. Advocacy. composing uplifting tracks. Smithsonian requested notebook for Harmony Resistance exhibit. Zuri donated. Anonymous at opening witnessing impact. Final lyric, tried silence me re-sang louder. Quiet morning, Zuri woke dream-free, strumming freely. Walls alive with vibrant scores, not erasing scars, but harmonizing them into strength. Justice blooms from one voice's echo, parents' chorus, witnesses' bridge, music's crescendo transforms worlds. If dignity stripped from your child's song, would you compose revolution or fade? If stirred, engage amplify against shadows.